Well, good morning. Did y'all have a good time last night? Welcome to the best of Westridge. Well, today we are going to continue in our series that we've entitled Never Church as Usual, as we're going to look at those things that make Westridge Westridge. And really, it's based on some of the lessons that we have learned over the last 20 years that may have made us into the church that we are today. That's made me into the person that I am today. And so this morning, we're going to discuss something that seems ultra simplistic and yet is probably one of the most complicated things to achieve, and that is to be an authentic Christian. What does authentic Christianity look like, and how do we achieve it? And I really believe that it's a choice that we make. It's a conscious decision where we move from life as normal into a life that is completely different. There comes a point in all of our lives when we come to this crossroads and we are faced with a decision between choosing between two roads that travel in two very different directions. And the first road that we see quickly curves around and disappears from our view. We can't see exactly where it leads, but from what we can see, it's not a real attractive road. This is a nasty dirt road that's all dusty and bumpy and should be declared more of a path than a road. And it's obvious that not too many people have traveled down that way. And while it's a little scary because of the unknowns, at the same time, it's like our heart is drawn to it. It's like somehow we know I belong there. And yet we still fight against it. And then there's this other road. It runs as far as the eye can see. It's a really nice paved stretch of highway. Well lit, well marked, and all the way down the road there are neon signs and really cool looking attractions. This road looks like it's going to be a lot of an easier journey than the dirt path, or at least a heck of a lot more fun. So as you stand there at the crossroads trying to make a decision which road to take, it's a no-brainer, right? I mean, life is tough enough on its own. Why would any of us choose the more difficult journey? Robert Frost put it like this: two roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less traveled by. And that has made all the difference. Jesus put it like this in the Gospel of Matthew chapter 7 as he winds down his very famous Sermon on the Mount. Enter through the narrow gate. For wide is the gate, and broad is the road that leads to destruction, and many enter through it. But small is the gate, and narrow the path that leads to life, and only a few find it. The difference between these two roads is that one leads us into a life of authenticity, which is admittedly more complex and challenging and difficult, versus the road that allows us to lead a life that is more acceptable. It's more popular and seemingly easier, quite frankly, because it's the road that the whole rest of the world and most of the people that we know are taking. However, Jesus makes it clear that one of those roads will lead to him, and the other road will lead us away from him And ultimately, as he describes it, it's a road that will lead us into destruction. It's a sobering thought. I think that the challenge that Jesus lays out for us here is that we need to stop living life as usual and begin to live a life that is radically different from what we see in the rest of the world, and quite frankly, probably the life that we've been living, which is easier said than done, right? I mean, it's tough to bring about change, significant change in our lives. I do think that, however, most of us want it. I mean, that's why we're here this morning, right? We want to live differently. We desire to live our life for God. We desire to be committed to Jesus. But inevitably, something holds us back from living the life that we want to live and committing to take that road that we know we want to take. Part of the problem is, if we're honest about it, that in the Christian life, there is no black and white, really. There are certain things that are. But most of the time, it's messy and difficult. And I would even go as far to say that from my experience, it is seldom easy to live out. I'm pretty sure that's why Jesus says, narrow is the path that leads to him, and only a few find it, because so many stumble and fall off the path that leads to Jesus, if they ever get started at all. Jesus never promised that following him would ever be easy. In fact, the scriptures talk a lot more about the pain and temptation and hardships and the sufferings of those who follow him than it ever does attempting to paint a picture of the Christian life as being one of coasting along the highway down easy street and everything is all good. And yet, so many of us have that kind of expectation of the Christian life as one of this peace and prosperity, and we should always be having consistent growth, and that our perception of Christian growth should be this kind of nice straight line that's always going straight up, and that we should never ever hit bad times because we have the protection of God. And it'd be nice if it were like that, but it's not. The truth of the matter is that the Christian life is not predictable. And while the good times may be really good and we may be feeling like we are a spiritual giant, there are plenty of times when our lives take a downturn and we bottom out and we are feeling godless. There are times when we feel like we are so close to heaven that we could just reach out and touch those pearly gates. And then there are those times when our feet are just burning because it feels like we're trudging through the hot sands of the desert again. Those desert times are very much a part of the Christian life. You may not feel the presence of God in those times. You may not feel very Christian-like in those times. But as long as we keep stumbling forward towards Jesus, we'll never fall away, and those are the times that we grow the most. Those are the times that we get stronger, and those are the times that prepare us for the rest of the journey, which may be even more difficult than what we've just been through. I want to be clear about something, and that is that a Christian is not somebody who is perfect, or never makes mistakes, or has it all together. Lord knows I'm just trying to keep it together every day. That's not real. That's pie in the sky Christianity that's not even achievable. That's why Jesus says, judge not lest you be judged. That's why Jesus said in this same sermon, stop looking at the speck of sawdust in your brother's eye when you got a plank coming out of your own. There ain't nobody any better than anybody else, and just because we've been a Christian and we've been on the path longer doesn't make us any better or any less susceptible to falling. All of us are just one step away from blowing it. The difference between somebody who follows God and somebody who doesn't is not whether or not I will blow it, because I will. It's how do I get back up? It's what's my next step? Is my next step to dust myself off and to stay on that path, or is my next step to take a turn and to get off that path as quickly as possible and go down the other road? But when you make the decision to stay on that path, it gets a little more difficult. Because however it is that we have just blown it, it requires change for us to move on, and it requires us to leave the old life, our old self, in the rearview mirror. And as I said, change is very difficult. But you also have to know that you're now leaving the main road. And authentic Christianity calls us to live a life that is counter to our culture. Christianity is countercultural. Do you know how foreign this Christianity thing, and I'm not talking about going to church on Sundays. I'm talking about really taking this Jesus thing on and living an authentic Christian life. Do you know how foreign that is to the rest of the world? What we believe in, what we strive for is so absurd to the rest of the world that sometimes we look downright foolish for the things that we believe in. As I said earlier, I'm just a volunteer here, and so I've been blessed that I am able to make a living outside the church, so I don't have to take any money from the church. And my paying job is that I am an owner in a real estate investment firm. And when I first started out, I really tried hard to keep my two worlds separate. I wanted to protect my image as this great business guy. And so I never, ever talked at all about the Christian part of my life, especially not the pastor part. But there was this one time, several years ago, when I was in the middle of a very heated zoning battle where I was trying to rezone a piece of property to put a resort up. But the community was completely opposed to it, and they were looking for anything that they could get their hands on to make me look bad in the eyes of the city council so they wouldn't approve the deal. So I woke up one morning to the following headline in the local newspaper that reads, "Developers' religion comes into question." And I looked at that and I said, I wonder what poor sap these guys are roasting now. Little did I know that I was that sap. So the article went on, and it went like this. A resident said she and a few friends spent a lot of time doing internet research on Sloniger when she found a link to an audio recording of the message the developer gave to his church last December, and she was appalled. It's very sensationalized, she said. His approach to church is brainwashing. She's talking about all of you, by the way. This guy is a crazed religious zealot. Now, hang on. You can call me a lot of things, and I've been called a lot of things, but religious zealot is not one of them. Sloniger's message, delivered the first Sunday the congregation moved into its new building, outlines the details of how the church acquired the property and paid for the facility through several well-timed real estate transactions. Throughout the message, Sloniger credited God with aligning circumstances in the church's favor and working to bless the congregation's ministry. Can you imagine? The resident said she thought other residents, whom she described as more conventionally religious, would be interested to know Sloniger actually believed the events in which he was involved were totally driven by God. Crazy. So, now I had a problem, right? With the internet out there, I soon realized that there was no more hiding my two lives. In fact, to this day, if you Google Darren Sloniger religious zealot, all that stuff pops up. And don't get any ideas, by the way. So to be honest with you, at first, it really bothered me because I thought that my image as a tough negotiator, as a tough businessman was going to be blown, and now I'm going to be known as the Billy Graham of business or something. And all nice and compassionate and not feared and revered as the tough negotiator that I wanted to be known as. How weak my faith can be at times. Let me tell you, I have had more moments than I care to remember where I have absolutely blown it, where I have shrunk back from my faith because I was afraid of what people would think about me if they knew what I really believed. It's very sad. But it was an awesome day, the day that I decided to live authentically and to be the same person in my business as I am in my home, as when I'm out with my friends, as I am in my church, as I am in my relationship with God. To go public with my faith in every area of my life and say who I really am. Yes, I'm a real estate developer, but can you believe it? I'm also a pastor. And what I'm really owning up to is saying, yes, I'm a Christian. Yes, I'm a follower of Jesus. I really believe in this Christianity stuff to the point that apparently I am a friggin' religious zealot. So fanatical, in fact, that I started church 20 years ago, and in spite of me brainwashing all of you, we're still here. And we're still doing the best we can to walk down that narrow dirt path together. That's who I am. You know, I spent a good part of my life trying to live up to other people's expectations of me and worrying about what people would think of me if they ever found out who I really am or what I really believed. But there came a point when I finally gave up being conventionally religious and entered into an authentic relationship with Jesus Christ. And it changed everything for me. The issue is that I am now living counterculturally. Even in the business world, I am living counter to the values of the business world. And while everybody is seeking more money and power and pleasure and self-centeredness, I'm going the wrong direction. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm trying to build a profitable company. But I will not do that in the compromise of what I am really seeking and what I really believe, which is a sense of mission and fulfillment and to live a life worthy of being called a follower of Jesus. I've said this many times through the years, and it is true, that while I am sometimes embarrassed to call myself a Christian because of all the evil and crazy that is done in the name of Christianity, I am never embarrassed to call myself a follower of Jesus because he is the only thing that I have found that is real in this world. The Jesus I follow could care less about how good we look on the outside. He just cares about what's in our heart. He cares about who we are at our core. The Jesus I follow is full of love and compassion and flies against all of the stuff that I hate about religion. But when I discovered the truth about who Jesus really is, when I actually sat down and read about the life of Christ, I couldn't help but want to follow him. That's what I want. That's what I desire, because when you find the real Jesus, you just know. That's who I want to be. And yet, when you hear the words of what Jesus says in that verse that we read earlier, it's sobering, because he says, "Wide is the gate and broad is the road that leads to destruction, and many enter through it. But small is the gate and narrow the road that leads to life, and only a few find it." I hate that verse. Because what it's saying is there are a whole lot more of us who are going to take the wrong road. Whether it's a conscious decision or whether it's because we're just completely checked out, we're going to take the wrong road. The road that leads us away from Jesus. Believe me, I've tried that road. I spent a good part of my life trying to stay on that road. But it doesn't work. I mean, when you really sit and think about it and you evaluate your life and where you're at, you realize it doesn't work. I am the happiest and most contented and the most fulfilled when my feet are firmly planted on the narrow path. The Bible makes it very clear. We're all a bunch of messed up people with an amazing capacity to screw up our lives. We all do things that go against God. We sin, we fall, we mess up. And not one of us have lived a life that is worthy of this. That while we were all a bunch of messed up sinners walking down the wrong road, Jesus loved us so much that he died for us. And it flipped culture upside down. And now, because of that, we can be healed. We can be healed of all the messed up stuff in our past. We can be healed of our sin, and we can be healed of the things that have a stranglehold on us, and we can be set free so that we can walk down the road that we know that we belong on. Through my 50 years of living, I have learned a thing or two about walking down the narrow dirt path that leads to Jesus. I have learned that it's not an easy road, but it's quite easy to lose our way. And I've also learned that no matter how hard the Christian life is, to follow Jesus and to live authentically with a sense of mission and purpose and passion, there is no better life. And so a lot of us are standing here this morning at a crossroads. It's time that we pay attention to the road signs of where we're headed and where we're going and what road we're on and what road we want to be on. Which road will you choose? The sad truth is, most of us will choose the wrong road. I love following Jesus with all my heart. And the truth is, I fail miserably at it. But every single day I wake up, I seek not to be the person that I created me to be, but to walk authentically as the person that God created me to become. I'm about as imperfect of a Christian as they come. But thank thank God he loves me anyway. And so because of that, I've made my choice. I am not going to live my life to build wealth or power or a big company or a big church. I would leave everything behind just to follow him. I am committed to taking this dusty, bumpy, narrow dirt path to the very, very end, where I know one day it'll lead me to Jesus. One day it'll lead me home.